the mainframes were actually connected. There were 4 places in the world: MIT, Stanford, University of Utah, and the University of Minnesota. And these were not traditional television screens. These were more like big oscilloscopes. They called them vector displays as opposed to raster displays. And they were very easy to program games which were very, very simple because you could draw vectors, but as you drew more and more of them, the refresh time would slow down and all of a sudden it'd start to flicker. So as long as you kept the number of objects you were drawing to a small number, you'd get good results. And then what Pong did in the first phase was to really bring it to the low-cost monitors that you had in your home, and because of mass production, they were cheap. As an example, a vector monitor in those days cost $15,000, and whereas you could use a TV set for $100, and that was kind of one of the metaphors that allowed it to be everywhere instead of a few specialized computer centers. When I first started out, my plan was to take a mini computer, which had just come down in price. I mean, we always thought of the very first time I thought of putting a game in an arcade. You take a $7 million computer and divide it by the number of quarters you have to put in, and the math doesn't work. And so then mini computers were $40,000 and then $30,000, and then all of a sudden across my desk came one that was under $10,000. And I said, aha, I bet I can do this. But my idea was to use one mini computer and run several displays so that I'd have more coin slots, so I could put it in amusement parks and things like that and make enough money to amortize this $8,000, $10,000 machine. What happened was I kept running out of cycle time. The computers were just too slow to keep all I think we were starting out with 6, and then I went down to 5, and went down to 4. And if I went down to 3, I knew that the machine couldn't make enough money to really pay for itself. So that was kind of a watershed. So I had to get it to work with 4. And so in order to do that, I had to keep making the terminals smarter, have them do more of the work. For example, in computer space, there was a star field. Well, you chewed up a lot of compute time if you calculated the star field by itself. So I just figured out a way to put random dots up, and it didn't correspond to any known galaxy, but hey, it's okay. And things like that. But I kept running out of cycle time, even on the calculating where the ships were and interrogating the joysticks and all that sort of thing. And so I basically abandoned the project. I said, you know, this won't work. I've got to wait until the prices come down some more. And then, sort of out of the blue, one late at night, I said, why don't I get rid of the mini computer entirely and do it all in hardware? And that was the breakthrough that really created the launch. Pong was never considered to be a viable product at the outset. It was considered to be a training project for Al Alcorn, who was my first engineering hire. And I felt that some of the things that we were working on, I had a contract to do a driving game, which was quite difficult. I thought it was too big of a reach, and so I just wanted him to get his feet wet by doing a simple game. And so I said, ball going left to right, paddles going up and down when you hit the ball. And he did it and was able to finish the initial board in about a week and a half. I mean, he was very good. We were actually planning to have a little guy with a paddle that you'd place it with the knob, and then you'd push the button and the paddle would go there. And if you hit it too soon, it would go up, and if you hit it too late, it would go down, and so on. But we got the paddle on there, and we decided to just have it bounce off the paddle We didn't call it the paddle that time. It was the part that was going to turn into the little player. And the game was fun. And so we said, hey, no need to gild the lily. This is good enough. We used this. It was called Andy Cap's Tavern at the time. One, because I knew the owner. Two, because we had already placed computer space in here. And this was kind of a mecca for not the suits part of Silicon Valley, but the techie parts of Silicon Valley. And computer space earned a lot of money in that environment. And so it was very easy to call up Bill and say, hey, I'd like to test Pong here. And he said, sure, bring it in. We had just put it in a little box. It was about like this, with the kind of cash box that you see on kiddie rides, just glued to the side. And we actually placed the box on a barrel. And that was the very first Pong unit. We had put the first unit on test right in this very establishment, right over there. And that was when the famous story about the service call, and the service call being that the cash box had completely filled up and the quarters would backed up through the coin mech. True story. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, and I looked at all the money we had in the world, and it was just enough to make 11, so we bought the parts for 11, built up, and never looked back. It was doing so well, I said, if I can't sell these 11, I can collect enough money just by putting them on location that I know I can pay for the parts and all the other things and keep the company running. And it was, very clear that you license something and you get a 5, 10, 15% royalty. Actually, with hardware, you very seldom got more than a 7% royalty. And yet there was a 50%, 60% gross margin possible. So you do a quick calculation and say, that's a better part of the business. It was a total smash hit. In fact, people started coming in early so they could get time on the machines. And that was the first time I ever saw quarters lined along to reserve a space, which has sort of become part of the mythology of video game sites. First of all, it was simple, and anyone could play, and yet it stretched you because we did the speed-up algorithm so that no matter how good you got, you will ultimately miss it. But there was another factor that happened that I think was very special, and that factor was that it became socially acceptable for a woman to ask a man to come play Pong with her. Women were very good at the game. It was something about the manual dexterity of the knob, and I think that it was a great social experience that was going on. The number of people that have told me in the last 25 years that they met their husband or wife playing Pong, it's been in the hundreds.